In the battle of the hero shooters, Blizzard has been in the lab cooking, and Stadium is the real deal. I did not want to stop playing it. It's got the same reward for hero mastery, great mechanics and responsive gameplay that you're used to from Overwatch 1 and 2, but now with like 100 times more depth than before. The perk system in the main game was pretty much universally appraised for being a great major benefit. Stadium is like 10 times bigger than that. Your hero shooter mechanical mastery will still send you far in Stadium, but it's not the be-all end-all, as there's a new strategy component. We're exploring the build varieties and counters, as well as adapting round to round can make a major difference in winning and losing. There's some major bugbears I have with the mode, but overall, I think it's a system that's built for the long term. It's sort of pointless for us to be endlessly debating the main game's format, as Stadium is complex enough that there's a lot to explore and also a lot for Blizzard to tweak, change, develop, and add more novelty over time. The main game, they add a hero, then all of a sudden the meta's broken, and because we didn't have hero bans forever, the gameplay was stale for months to come until some unreasonable balance expectation was met. Even if sometimes, if player expression could have countered that thing, but it's a whole nother issue we don't have time to discuss today. With Stadium, more of the game is put into your hands, and the expectation, rather than the dev team to change the numbers on your hero, you get to do it. And while the perk system feels a little bit limited because some of the perks aren't as transformative to gameplay as we might have liked, the powers and items in Stadium certainly are. There's far less heroes, but the ones that do have several build options, which, while not all are equally balanced, do give you the opportunity to express yourself in a variety of different play sets. Especially with the random nature of teammates, it gives you the flexibility round to round to develop your playstyle over a given match. Stadium, I think, provides nearly the best of all worlds. For the max casual players that find the most novelty fun out of modes like the April Fool's patch, this is a competitive mode where those types of things are more or less balanced. Lots of characters can fly randomly or get 1 second of their ultimate as a power-up. The novelty fun factor of getting to try new things on the hero you like automatically is more fun than the base game for a lot of players. Now, I'm not going to say it's amazingly balanced, but it's more balanced than you would have expected. And while just like in Overwatch 1 or 2 base game, some games you feel like your team that you have isn't working together, the comp you have is terrible against theirs. Now there's the added pressure of the build you have might actually suck, but the upside is, whereas in the normal game you have to leave that match with very little to learn, honestly, other than the very minute gameplay improvements you could have made, with Stadium, you can theory craft on ways that you can adapt to the upcoming games when you get in a similar situation, of which might not actually happen very often because the novelty of the types of situations you get in is so diverse based on the diverse playstyles of each hero. What do you do when Reinhardt's flying into your backline? Now, it has a ranked mode technically, that's the only way to play, but it's a very casual ranked mode. As in, it's more of a progression system, and I don't really know the ranked-based matchmaking yet. But when I lost, I didn't lose much progress on my, quote, rank. So importantly, this isn't an elo system where there's a straight pecking order of your value as a player being determined by a competitive number. This kind of system is more similar to the inflationary nature of the Marvel Rivals ranked system in its base game, which is sort of scrutinized. The upsides of that is you feel like you play longer, you can get a rank even if you kind of don't, quote, deserve it. The downside is, well, competitive integrity. And that's, I think, the only audience I would see not being in love with Stadium, the players that want the most refined competitive experience, which frankly, 5v5 Overwatch really is. It might be boring and formulaic and samey and limited in diversity, either whether it be hero selection or team comp diversity. It maximizes for FPS fundamentals. Stadium is on the entire opposite end of the spectrum, where it maximizes for game knowledge and adaptability. Theory crafters like me will only play this mode from now on. If I felt empowered in 6v6 because I know how to counter pick and make the entire enemy team comps irrelevant, well, Stadium is my shit. Because while reaction time, aim, and snap decision making is very important in Overwatch, in Stadium, the long haul trajectory of several rounds of play and adapting your build and tactics carries, I would say, about equal weight, which would be the most it carries out of 5v5, 6v6, or now Stadium, the new Battlegrounds-esque side mode, which Blizzard is hoping is going to be the future of their franchise. Why? Well, it's third person, so now they can sell you more skins for you to look at. Okay, so I kind of assumed third person would be a major advantage because you just have more situational awareness. You can see enemies around corners or perhaps even see your team behind you or not. And I'm not exactly sure if it's because I've played Overwatch for nearly a decade and I'm just more used to first person, or if it's an objective truth about the mode, but I found it quite difficult to pilot lots of characters in third person. And I tried different fields of view. If you max out the field of view, it'll put your character right behind the crosshair with maximum camera angle behind you. I like this for Reinhardt, and I will use it, and I would have used it if I had the chance in the main game as well. Just for the mere fact of being able to see in my immediate vicinity, because maybe I want a 180 pin or swing or know if my teammate's right behind me or not. Switching from hammer to shield is fully natural in that way. There's no camera switch when doing so. But trust me, first person is still pretty comfortable by itself because you're going to be used to where your player model is when it comes to like taking cover and stuff. If I needed to track on a character like D.Va, being in third person actually felt impossible, partially because your character model kind of gets in the way. So if I had to track really quickly, I wanted to be in first person, and ultimately, on almost every character, I preferred first person. Maybe I'm just bad, but luckily it's an option. A character like Genji in third person, creeping around a corner with a backline flanker assassination playstyle, was a heavy advantage because I could pre-aim and quickly clean up the support before they knew what hit them. But also, setting my field of view at the lower value, the advantage was my player model was off to the side, away from my crosshair, so I could see my crosshair better, but then I struggled to stay in cover like I'm used to. Lots of times the enemy was able to see me before I thought they could, and I'm getting deleted because I'm not properly playing the angles. Now, maybe that's something that I can learn over time, but I feel playing first-person shooter games for so long, I know exactly where to stand to use cover appropriately, and I'm usually not taken off guard when the enemy can or can't see me. This is important because I think a lot of players saw the third person, were worried about it, if it's the best way to play or not. I don't know. I saw my best success playing in first person. It doesn't really change much. I think their thought process publicly is to say that, well, because there's so much chaos going on, you just need the situational awareness. They want you to see your character to sell you skins. That's why. That's the main reason. I mean, maybe the chaos adds to it, but frankly, there is actually not much more chaos. Each character does a lot more, but it's not like you actually can track that chaos. It's not like you're seeing every single cooldown use to inform decisions. You still are just playing your hero, which means you need to focus on landing your plays in your position. While the strategy overall matters between rounds, during the round, you better lock in, land your shots, and don't get shot too much to be sent to the spawn room yourself. That's the game. It's still Overwatch, right? It's not an RTS game all of a sudden where you need to know exactly where everything is at the same time. I saw a lot of comments about it, so I think this is actually a concern. Some players turned off by the idea of third person, especially if they think it's going to be a major advantage. And I think it's a minor advantage in certain matchups, and you're not going to really feel at a huge disadvantage if you don't want to use it, except on a few characters. Stadium is a round-based mode, which I'm super hyped about, and that would be because I played Counter-Strike for years, which it too has an economy system. This is more of a MOBA game with the Counter-Strike rounds, I think, is a decent way to think about it. There's small catch-up mechanics, like if you kill the enemy who's got a bounty on them, you'll get extra credits. There's a mercy rule that if they're up by 3 rounds and 15k currency, you just lose, but otherwise it's a best of 7. And the cool thing about this is that there is a set of powers that are locked in that you get on the odd rounds. They're free and guaranteed, and often very transformative. Again, they're not all balanced, but each hero has a suite of options to build towards, usually one of your abilities or playstyles. I highly suggest that before you start playing next week, you either watch upcoming breakdown guides or just walk yourself through learning at least your hero so you know what the options are, or if you even like some of the perks, or should I say powers? Because some of them sound nice, but then when you try to use them, they're uninspired. And then other ones might surprise you with how effective or how they suit your playstyle. The worst time I've had playing Stadium is when I was on a power that I just wasn't really feeling for that situation. There's a bunch of uniform items that everyone has access to, which means you always have the option to build your character a bit more towards offense, defense, or other situational ones like doing more damage to a target that's low, which is important for characters that need to confirm kills for their kit to even get online. Or conversely, having reduced damage when you are low. Good for the characters on the team that you feel like you're the one getting focused. Or the weak link in the overall hero matchup, which still happens and still matters. Okay, counterpicking, especially in a mode where you are locked to your one hero, still important, but because you have the build, you always have at least some options to mitigate that. We sort of expected the main game perk system to do that, not so much honestly, but here in Stadium, yes, definitely you have the option to either mitigate your weaknesses or emphasize a different strength. I really like the round system because there is good pacing on the spikes of power. If you get blown out with the 3-0 mercy rule, at least in that third round, you're getting your second power because you get it on the odd rounds. Your power scales up from round to round, and by round 7, if you get there, there's a lot of wackiness going on. And that's where I would say the build knowledge matters the most, as the things that are going to be the most effective in the early game, I think are going to be really obvious to be figured out and meta theory craft within days. Typically, I'd say the characters that are able to get 1 second of their ultimate on a cooldown, that's like a huge power spike, right? As opposed to some of the other powers are like a few percentage increase on one ability or another. Those like percentage based ones add up more over time later into the game, just based on how that math works. Whereas anything that gives you an extra ability typically is more transformative and more devastating early game, but sometimes might fall off late game. And the fact that I even can craft a narrative about that and tell you some games go like this or that is interesting, because in normal Overwatch, you often feel stuck in the matchup you're in, and the blowouts don't feel like you can learn anything. Even if, yes, you could get coaching and improve your individual gameplay and all that. With the build system, I always felt like there was some strategical mastery I could still probably try to leverage, at least in the first, I don't know, 1,000 hours or something, or however long it's going to take to really like figure out every permutation. In terms of complexity, I would say it isn't as complex as a normal MOBA game, but I think you'll be surprised at how complex it is. Does that make sense? I see the items and builds and calculus you have to do in order to learn Deadlock. I played Dota for a few years. I think the truth is there's actually a lot of item progressions in MOBA games that are just filled with stat sticks. So while yes, there's a bunch of transformative abilities in MOBAs, usually it kind of is like a handful typically that are the cornerstones, like spell immunity or teleport or whatever. And a bunch of other items are just good for stats. Stadium has like a similar mix, because Overwatch Stadium items, yes, there's the universal ones, but there also is hero specific ones. A handful of them will be gimmicky and not actually that helpful, but a few of them are nearly as powerful as powers, which I actually think is a little bit BS. Like they add an extra ability, not just an effect, while adding stats. So you want to focus on getting your hero specific items first and foremost, as they may dramatically transform your play, but sometimes just getting the generalized stat stick item is fine as well, if not better perhaps. To that degree, it's balanced enough that you're going to feel like on any given hero, you can viably try for your style. Whether that's DPS Lucio, healer Moira, flying Reinhardt, shield-based Reinhardt. Again, not all equally balanced, quote unquote, but depending on the variety of team composition you're against, it might open up the viability of some of the lesser strength builds. And end of the day, while I like to be a meta slave and pick the strongest stuff most of the time to give myself an advantage in that given situation, I also don't mind trying out things and being creative if I think it gives me a chance to win. Perhaps even a deeper sick satisfaction if I theory craft something that seems unpopular or niche, but put it to great use in the given match I'm in. Stadium gives you the opportunity to do that quite often. Let's get some examples on builds now. I've mostly been saying positive stuff, so I will show you first one that I thought was a bit of a dud. I saw a power that said I could get triple kunai as Kiriko, and to me, when I saw this, I imagined it would be a tight spread like Genji. Nope, it's so wide that unless you're in melee range, it's not going to hit. So I immediately realized the only way to actually make that viable is to go towards the blink or swift step in any direction perk, which I wasn't going to get then until round 3. So until then, I sort of had a power that I just couldn't use. That was terrible. And also, I suppose, my fault, because as I said, knowledge on these builds is everything. You're going to ruin your experience if you fail your build like I did here. And even so, I do not suggest this build for almost anyone except the most skilled, because the way you would need to get it to work is to be able to mechanically TP right on top of an enemy, tap them in the head. And while I think you could mechanically get that to work, and it will be an amazing pub stomping strategy for content creators to make, it is an all-in gimmicky strat. There's quite a lot of stats and build paths to make it work, such as faster fire rate after using an ability, or other buffs once you hit kunai or use an ability, so it's viable in a way, but that playstyle is something for players in the top 0.1%, in my opinion. Now, despite me saying all of that and telling you should not do it because you're not good enough, there's gonna be some of you that are saying, hold my beer. Please do not do that with your team and kunai responsibly, especially when you compare to the other builds that I got the hang of pretty quickly. There is a power that gives you more ult charge for cleansing debuffs with Suzu, and just like normal Overwatch, getting your ult faster than the enemy sets the tempo, which is important in rounds of Stadium because there's only going to be a few main fights anyway to win the whole round. So that alone was insane. In this particular game, we go up against an Ashe who are applying debuffs all over the place. In fact, I told my team to tank it deliberately so I could cleanse them all, just stand together and absorb it. Then there's another power called Tuzu. Because Suzu's not strong enough, they give you a second charge of Suzu. Yes, all of those other benefits I said before also stack. So needless to say, this was a pretty easy game. Then I found there is an item, not a power, but an item that allows you to double jump. So Kiriko, who could just be built for a DPS build altogether, gets 2 Suzus, a double jump, great headshots, cleanses. Like, it's a lot of power. Okay, it's pretty good, pretty strong. But don't worry, I do think all of the characters are pretty OP at their best builds. But certainly the skill expression ones, particularly I'm going to say Lucio and Kiri, there is way too much skill expression for characters like Mercy and Moira to even come close to competing. Now at a casual level, and maybe based on the matchmaking and whatnot, it won't really matter. But we've seen long eras of Overwatch 2 competitive where Lucio Kiri dominated everything because their skill expression is so insane. I went for a DPS Lucio build, then increased my boop radius, and if I knocked them into walls, it dealt damage. And rather than investing in perks for my team, I very rarely healed my team, but I invested in damage upgrades to my weapon. This made me a menace on the battlefield. Oh, he gets a double jump as well, which makes a satisfying little froggy noise when you jump off a wall. So these are characters that are hard to hit, deal immense damage, also heal their team, and have insane ultimates. Already in the base game, it's fairly difficult to try to, quote, balance the value of Mercy and Moira up against these mobile characters that reward you for headshots. While Mercy and Moira do have cool builds that let them do cool things on their own, going for either damage Moira, heal Moira, you got multi-orbs, orbs that slow down when they're close to their target to make them more effective. Some of those lower mechanical cost heroes are interesting in Stadium for sure, but it's just that there's no way to really cap the insane power you're going to get out of skill expressive heroes because they can just do more things now. So I think it's even harder to justify a lower overall peak output character. But that might be me trying to be too serious and try hard about this. I'm not so sure. We also are only in a playtest currently, so who knows what the actual SR of anybody in the lobby is. I know I've been in lobbies all over the place, playing with and against some of our top streamers in our game, as well as players that I'm certain are medal rank adjacent. Reinhardt is an interesting character in this mode because he feels incredibly dominant and OP at certain times and then useless otherwise. Ryan has upgrades to his Fire Strike. My favorite one is when you use both Fire Strikes in a row, the second one leaves a trail of lava. And in the early rounds, when you upgrade the ability power on that, I have seen enemy teams get nuked. However, with a combination of them learning how to play against it, as well as them building around it, it's very common in the late game for the enemy to increase their speed, maneuverability, survivability. Lots of things get more mobility, extra jumps, extra speed. So because of that, getting hit with a Fire Strike as a concept becomes more difficult. There is an item to speed up your Fire Strike, but even then, maybe I'm just bad at using it, but I still struggle to hit them and dominate the way I was in the earlier rounds. To compensate for this, Reinhardt gets some insane mobility options where he can fly with his pin, so he just gets to go wherever. But by that stage of the game, being any melee character kind of looks like a joke. And if the enemy's smart, they'll just crossfire around you slowly. It'll be hard to close the distance even when you can fly. Because remember, everything's got more health now too. So meanwhile, other tanks like Zarya get multiple bubbles and Junker Queen gets lots of speed and can play that all in, all out style. The reason I bring this up is because perhaps this is just the nature of Stadium. And whereas in the main game, we will criticize Reinhardt and say, well, he's just never going to fit in 5v5. Ramatra outclasses him. It's impossible to balance. He doesn't have enough options. He's too team reliant. In Stadium, at least, they can either tweak the items and powers, tweak the numbers, or we as a player base can just learn, which is the same way in MOBA games, that some characters have an early game advantage and some have a late game advantage, which is just going to be the nature of how the perks and the items pan out. Because when you win as Reinhardt and all you need to do is shield your team, it's like insane value. You have a soldier with a mercy on him and you just shield him and the whole enemy team falls. Well, for a few rounds, that feels like the easiest game of your life. But when the enemy is staying afar from you, poking you down, and you can never bear anything down or really influence any fight, that feels impossible. But why do we as gamers expect the game development to somehow fix such a problem? Certain things have limitations and certain things are baked into the game design. I think one of the major benefits of Stadium is it gets the pressure off of the developers to have to balance it, because you have so many tools for you to control the power of your character that even if the most ideal path isn't balanced, it's so hard to optimize towards that anyway, because you're not only optimizing for your gameplay, you're optimizing for your execution of your build and the strategy of your build, which there's so many areas where you could consider improving before you even really should blame the game. I think it allows for the creativity of Overwatch to be at the forefront as opposed to just expecting the result of the game to be in your favor. One example I want to show you from that is I have tried to play Genji, who has lots of ways to upgrade his Swift Strike, which is fun. But when I tried to use that build up against a Zarya, Mei, Cassidy, Ana comp, it was impossible to flank without getting hit by a CD. It was impossible to maneuver the map without getting hit by beams. And while I did have the Genji item that makes deflect also work against beams, my playstyle of flanking behind them meant I would still get surrounded anyway. So learning that, when I went up against a Zarya again, what I decided to do is try to swap my strategy. Genji's a very flexible Overwatch hero. Sometimes he's been played as a flanker-heavy style that might work in solo queue. In a more team-reliant way, though, he can brawl in the front, manipulating the tank battle of 5v5. So now I try to look for options that maximized deflect. Anytime you get a small bit of your ultimate attached to a cooldown, that is going to be very strong in Stadium. Highly suggest it. Soldier gets a bit of Visor when he helixes, Lucio gets a mini sound barrier on Amp It Up, and Genji gets one slash of Dragon Blade at the end of Deflect, which remember, you can animation cancel to happen when you want. So with this, I was able to face tank to make space for my Orisa, reflecting the enemy's damage and having a big melee swing when I wanted in the front line. That alone, I think, threw this enemy team off, and maybe they just didn't understand the mechanics or didn't realize that we were just going to win the frontline trade if they didn't flank. That's what the enemy needed to do at this point, is get around the deflect, because I also was buffing the cooldown time, so I had it more often. Then from there, I tried to empower the Dragon Blade, and I noticed there was a Genji item that healed my armor when I casted Dragon Blade. And yes, it counts for the extra Dragon Blade swing, so I was constantly healing myself every deflect. Then when I casted Dragon Blade, I had another item that extended the duration of Dragon Blade, and now I'm just swinging the blade all the time. Not only is all of what I just said super cool, it's an entirely different playstyle than the Swift Strike version of Genji, which is going to require you to go in and manipulate the flank battle more. To maximize reflect value, you want to get them all fighting you in a cone. To maximize Swift Strike, you're going to want to find flanking lanes. I've seen reasons for both of them to be very effective. The main game, you're going to have to learn the esport, which it's got more and more try-hard sweaty in that regard over time. especially as more heroes have more complex and powerful mechanics. Whether it's in 5v5, you've got to play a constant arena shooter game with cover and timing, or 6v6 open so far has been very much about building the correct team comp just to function. Stadium was like if that strategy component was built into 5v5, with rounds similar to Counter-Strike and an item system that does rival MOBA games, frankly. The biggest weakness for me so far is I do not like blind pick. As in, you can see what your team are indicating they want to pick, but you have no idea what the enemy is. Then you're locked into your role, and I think it's quite punishing for you to be on a comp that isn't so synergistic. Like if their tank naturally denies your damage, you're going to have a hard time. Or if your supports can't hold up against whatever aggressive characters they have, you'll also have a hard time. All of the counter picking issues that the community has hated about 5v5 is way, way worse in Stadium. Now, yes, there's ways that we can counteract that with the builds, but getting an early game advantage does matter. So while Reinhardt does fall off in the later rounds, if their comp just runs you down, a lot of the tanks barely can hold up against that. So I would like, finally, the long-awaited draft mode into this. Now, granted, there's not that many heroes, but that also would mean any pick ban type thing would go kind of fast with this, or maybe a more casual way to do it. I'm not sure. I don't have all the answers for you here today, but I do know team comp mismatches feel a little worse because you're locked into your hero. Now, with expertise, like I did with my Genji example, maybe you can figure out how to build against whatever problem you're having, but even that has its limitations. And it's going to take some patience for players to figure that out, even to the degree you can. Then on top of that, the hero variety is very low. It feels like a small sliver of character options in any given role. And I can't say I'm a massive fan of the roster that's in play. It seems like they were biasing towards heal bot supports and brawly DPS, seeing as that's the nature of the Stadium team fights. But I get kind of tired of seeing so much Mei and Reaper. And also other 5v5 solo tank playability concerns are not alleviated in this mode necessarily. Sometimes you feel utterly overpowered and unstoppable as tank, and other times you're targeted by everything, and with way more ability spam going on, it can be difficult to outplay it or just annoying to have to deal with. But again, I've only played it for a couple days now, but certainly in the playtest with a variety of skill rating players, you can kind of see how the vast majority of all hero shooter players only look at the tank line, for better and worse. And because you can't swap tanks and you don't know what they're going to be picking against you, you're limited to their powers and items in order to counteract whatever barrage of ability focus you're going to get. Luckily, Reinhardt has a cleanse on pin as an item. Zarya can improve their bubbles, and maybe I'll learn more with more playtime. But I think this could be alleviated even if there was a picking draft without necessarily pick and ban, though I would like that. But even just both teams slowly picking their heroes one by one, or something similar, rather than blind pick and then jump into a matchup that just isn't optimal and you would have switched off it in the main game if you had the choice. I will say there's some benefit to that because it allows hero swapping to not be a crutch in this mode. Instead, you got to learn your build. And maybe it just sucks for the given situation, but at least it lets you focus on that as opposed to holding the H key. Guys, that's it for my review of Stadium. Do you think it's the future of Overwatch? I think it's going to take this game into its next decade. Certainly a mode that I can sink my teeth into, and I'm excited to play when it fully comes out next week. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to actually get notified when I upload new videos. That's been it for me. I've been Frito. I'll see you guys next time.